This is NatSec Matters.
I'm host Michael Allen with Beacon Global Strategies. Today I'm joined by Mr. Anthony Vinci, CEO of the AI company Vico and an adjunct senior fellow at the Center for New American Security. Mr. Vinci previously served as the first Chief Technology Officer at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. Earlier in his career, he served as an intelligence officer in Iraq, Africa, and Asia. Mr. Vinci joins us today for a discussion on his upcoming book, The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, The Future of Espionage and the Battle to Save America, where he delves into how emerging technologies are reshaping the world of intelligence and espionage. Stay with us as we speak with Mr. Anthony Vinci. Anthony, welcome to NatSec Matters.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, you're an old friend, colleague. You've got a great background, and we're looking forward to talking about your book, The Fourth Intelligence Revolution. But for our audience, remind us, where have you worked and what have you done?
Sure. I started out as an intelligence officer. Like a lot of people in my generation, 9/11 happened, and I wanted to get into the game. So I became a case officer and served downrange in Iraq and some places like that. Actually left the intelligence community and went and started a tech company and ran that for a while and got it's like the mafia. I got dragged back into the intelligence community.
Yeah.
After that, became the CTO and the associate director of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency.
So you're perfect to write a book about technology in the intelligence community because you've served out in the field and you've run a tech company. And as I understand it, you're also investing in tech companies here now as well.
Yeah, I have seen the intelligence community from about all the different angles you could see it from. The guy out in the field, the guy managing the agency, the guy buying the technology, the guy investing in the technology, now the guy actually selling technology to the intelligence community.
Gotcha. Well, that's perfect. You should work at Beacon Global Strategies. All right. Can you tell us a bit about your book? First of all, it's the fourth intelligence revolution. What were the first three?
Yeah, I look back at intelligence, the modern form of intelligence, really starting with World War II. Before that, America had intelligence agencies, but really it was just for the military. They weren't permanent. They weren't peacetime focused. World War II is the first time we had a centralized intelligence function. And I think of it as the Big Bang for American intelligence. We actually closed down our first agency. It was called the OSS after World War II, but then started another one, the CIA in 1947. That kind of heralded the next revolution in intelligence where we professionalized intelligence. And that went along for a long time. I call that the golden age of intelligence. And 9/11 changed everything again.
Yeah.
And we had to expand intelligence and network intelligence and incorporate non-intelligence organizations into the intelligence world, like Incutel, which is CIA's venture capital fund, even things like that. And now we're experiencing the fourth intelligence revolution.
All right. Well, then let's jump right into it. What is the fourth intelligence revolution? And how does that relate to our current geopolitical environment?
The geopolitics are driving the creation of the fourth intelligence revolution, as well as technology, and in particular, artificial intelligence. And those two factors have created a completely new approach to intelligence that people 20 years ago wouldn't even recognize. And it's marked by three different things. One, intelligence is expanding. Whereas intelligence used to be really primarily focused on political and military issues, now it's becoming focused on essentially everything. Economic issues, there's economic intelligence, science and technology. There are even foreign adversaries spying on genetic information and things like that. Two, AI is being incorporated into every aspect of intelligence. Everything that is done from collection to analysis to dissemination is going to be done by AI. And in fact, machines are going to spy on machines. We're going to have AI spies, and the adversary is going to have AI spies, and they're going to spy on each other. The third and probably most radical change is that in this world, intelligence is no longer just targeted at presidents and generals and people like that. It's becoming targeted at everyone. So cyber attacks like Salt Typhoon have hacked into nearly every American cell phone. So we are all targets now. And that is completely different. And it means that not only must we be defended from these intelligence threats, but actually what's going to happen is intelligence is going to democratize, and we're going to in some ways think like and even do intelligence.
So is this related to, and I relate it myself to when I was on the House Intelligence Committee, and we would get briefings on enormous collection channels, but we couldn't translate it all. And there weren't enough translators in the world to be able to do it. And in a sense, there's so much information in the world, there are not enough analysts to make sense of it. So you have to use AI. It's not really optional anymore, right?
Yeah, that tsunami of data, and that really started happening in the third intelligence revolution and after 9/11 as there was a lot more technical and signals data collection in the world. And that's continuing now. But what's different is that you're right, AI is necessary to do that analysis, but also AI is going to be used for other things. It's going to be used, for example, to convince people of things. Whereas a lot of us think about information operations in terms of, Russia or China trying to create propaganda on social media. AI can go one step further and enter into a dialogue with you and actually try to convince you of things. And that is really the frontier of where intelligence is going.
Wow.
And where AI is going.
So on any number of social networks, then you could have Russian or Chinese bots communicating with people who might be susceptible to being persuaded of bad things about the United States.
We're already seeing something like that happen with DeepSeek, which is a Chinese AI similar to ChatGPT or Gemini. And DeepSeek has a bias. It has the Chinese Communist Party bias. So it withholds information on Tiananmen Square and things like that, which the CCP don't agree with. And it could be used to convince people of things because, like a lot of people, like I know I do it, I bet you do it too. You enter into a dialogue with AI now, with ChatGPT. You're asking it questions, it's giving you answers, and you're going back and forth. Well, if you're on DeepSeek, you'd be going back and forth, but with an AI that had the bias of the CCP, and it could be trying to convince you of things that were against your interests and against America's interests.
So if I had to categorize these, the first was sort of AI to help analysts. This sounds like AI in the service of covert action, maybe covert influence, covert messaging. How might AI be used for the flat out collection of intelligence?
Another parallel thing that's going on is there are a lot of these autonomous systems now, these drones. We're seeing them in Ukraine and elsewhere, and they are collecting information. They have cameras on them and other types of sensors, and AI is being used to drive that collection and do that analysis.
Like to do it better, like to know the places to look better than a drone operator?
Exactly. And to recognize what's on the image, to see that it's a person or a truck or a T-34 tank or something along those lines. And so that is going to expand where AI is incorporated into essentially every sensor in the world.
Yeah.
And there are more and more sensors in the world. This is everything from the sensors in your smartphone and your smartwatch to cameras on streets and things like that. And there's going to be AI incorporated into essentially every one of those sensors. And some of those sensors are going to have their information get back to intelligence agencies. And it's going to be collected by them through that process.
That's amazing. Let's talk a bit about how the intelligence community is adopting AI. I was struck by a conversation I had with a former senior at CIA. And he had just left the building, and he was being quite frank, and he said, you know what? We haven't really adopted AI yet. We're dabbling, not adoption. Is that fair, or what's the pace of change inside the actual bureaucracies?
This was, in many ways, my primary job when I was at NGA, was to figure out how to bring AI into intelligence. And that was several years ago now, and we made some strides, but we didn't get there. Intelligence agencies are still trying. It's not. I think your friend is correct. It's not fully adopted. But what's interesting about this AI revolution and this intelligence revolution is it may not come from the traditional way of adopting technology in government, which is the government making the technology or buying it from traditional contracting companies. It seems like it's going to come from commercial companies. And as we're all seeing, commercial companies are adopting AI quickly.
Yeah.
The big hyperscalers like Microsoft and Google have incorporated AI into essentially every part of their product. Other companies like ChatGPT are creating whole new products that didn't even really exist even 5 years ago. There was no kind of AI chat function like that, and they are all bringing that to the government. And there's been it's been well reported that OpenAI and Anthropic and other companies are actually offering this technology for $1 a year
Wow.
to the Pentagon to use. And the technology is also being incorporated into the day-to-day software the government already uses. So Microsoft has AI that's incorporated into Microsoft Office. Nearly every government employee has Microsoft Office. So I think AI is going to come into the government through those paths rather than be invented in the government. And it's also coming from smaller, more nimble, newer, non-traditional companies in the defense technology space, like Palantir and Anduril and so forth, that will be more agile in terms of bringing it into the government. So what I actually see is an acceleration over the next couple of years where this kind of technology is adopted much more rapidly than we're accustomed to seeing.
Well, that's good to hear. I hope we're not trying to recreate the wheel internally within the U.S. government and that we are adopting commercial tech. Let's talk a little bit about what you mentioned at the beginning, that intelligence traditionally was about political and military affairs, and now it's expanded to the economic realm. In no small part, I'm certain, because of China being a different type of rival compared to the Soviet Union, which had no economic prowess to speak of. And of course, China does. They've also had a very aggressive economic espionage campaign going on against the United States for at least 2 decades, probably more. Why don't you describe a little bit about how your book deals with economic espionage, and then let's talk about whether the U.S. intelligence community is able to shift and collect and do and analyze more in this realm.
You're right. China really is the driver here. The Soviets did a little bit of economic espionage on us during the Cold War, and we did it on them, but this was a minor part of the Cold War. China has used an asymmetric approach to competing with America. They know they can't come head on with a military confrontation. And so they used economics as one of the ways to compete with us. And a big part of that was economic espionage. It's stealing intellectual property and giving it to their companies. It's using economics, in fact, as a diplomatic tool to pressure the U.S. or to pressure U.S. allies. And so they have a significant amount of economic intelligence targeted at us, whereas we in America have always treated economics as separate from the intelligence community. We're very uncomfortable with doing it in any way. However, I think that time is over and we need to get more comfortable.
I think under George H.W. Bush, we promulgated the policy that the United States doesn't do economic espionage, and now we need to rethink that?
We do need to rethink it. We need to provide, the way I would put it is, we need to provide the president a capability. And that's what the intelligence community does. We can ask a policy question about whether we should do it or how we should do it, but the intelligence community needs to provide the capability to answer questions, because this is part of the competition. And it may not happen in the traditional way. Perhaps it happens by partnering with commercial companies, or perhaps it happens by partnering with other departments like the Department of Commerce or Department of Treasury. We can talk in different ways about how to do it, but the intelligence community needs to be able to understand what's happening in Chinese and other countries' economic systems, what's happening with their companies, because there could be threats. They could develop an economic capability that would be against our interests. In many ways, TikTok was that. TikTok happened very quickly and is a platform for information operations from the Chinese government, and that's why the law was passed to force the divestiture or ban it. And we really, in the intelligence community, did not see that coming. And for the next threat, we need to be able to see it coming.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our discussion with Anthony Vinci.
If you're looking for a way to make a difference this Veterans Day, consider the work of Hero Dogs, a local DC nonprofit that improves the lives of our nation's heroes by placing skilled service dogs with veterans and first responders living with disabilities. Beacon Global Strategies is proud to sponsor our very own hero dog, Ginny, who's currently trained to support a future veteran. You can follow Ginny's journey on Instagram at HeroDogsGinny. That's at HeroDogsGinny, Ginny with a G. To learn more about how you can help make a difference this Veterans Day, please visit www.hero-dogs.org. Happy Veterans Day.
Let's talk a little bit about what it practically means to be engaging in economic espionage. We have no shortage of targets overseas. Nuclear programs, probably politburos and military leadership. But this will require a sea change, or at least a culture change, across the U.S. intelligence community to start targeting, let's call it Chinese technology, CTOs or CEOs or people like that. Is there, without getting into any classified information, is there any sense that the U.S. intelligence community is making this sort of wholesale change and cultural shift?
I think that people are recognizing the problem. It's been incorporated into the national security strategies and national defense strategies that there is a economic component to the competition. So I think they recognize the issue. I think the actual process of gathering intelligence is probably very similar to what's already in place. So using, human intelligence officers to recruit CTOs and AI scientists in a similar way as you might have used them to recruit colonels and government bureaucrats in the past, using signals or other forms of intelligence to collect on it. But the targets are just very, very different. And here we have this separation between the government and companies. In China, it's a much blurrier separation. There are state-owned enterprises and even companies that are not state-owned or very highly influenced by the government. So we'd need to figure out exactly who to target, how to target them, and then get comfortable with doing that targeting. And the real issue, I think, when you get down to it, is that whenever you talk about an economic topic, it could involve Americans, because it might be a Chinese company, but they might employ Americans, or they might be doing business in America. And I don't think we want our intelligence community spying on American companies. I would never say that. I don't think anybody wants that. So we'd have to be very, very careful. We'd have to have a lot of rules around how we did this, and that's what I think people need to get comfortable with, and then and potentially work across the government with departments that were not intelligence agencies to do this in the way that we did it after 9/11 with counterterrorism.
Yeah.
Where the CIA and other agencies might work with the Department of Transportation because that's where the threat was. Well, perhaps now the CIA and other agencies need to work with Department of Commerce and other agencies because that's where the threat is. So there might be I would suggest a partnership and a sharing of authorities and capabilities. And in my book, I actually suggest a specific way to do this, which is to create a center similar to NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, but for economics, a National Economic Defense Center, you could call it.
So we could start collecting more economic technology stuff from China, information from China, and we could use it for our own analytical education for policymakers. But it's a totally different step, it seems to me, to decide, you know what, we're going to share this with one of our semiconductor companies because we want them to know whatever the innovation was that the Chinese figured out. So it seems to me you could bifurcate this question of what to do with economic and analysis or information.
Yeah, again, the intelligence community should provide the capability to do that, to collect it. China certainly shares the information they collect from our companies with their own companies for competitive purposes. There could be a policy question of should we share it with American companies. But let me suggest it in this way. Imagine there's another COVID, maybe one that's even more deadly than the last one, and is really harming the American population, and we can't find a cure. But a Chinese biotechnology company does find that cure and won't share it with us because we're deep in a Cold War with them and they won't share it. I would suggest that most American people would agree that in that case, we should get that intellectual property, however they figured out the cure, and share it with American companies to save American lives. And there's a series of technologies like that where it might be necessary to do it for our own interests. And in fact, I bet if you asked your average Chinese Communist Party member, they would actually agree with that logic because they do it every day. They probably wouldn't even hold it against us. They'd say, of course you're going to do that.
Yeah.
And so we should be open to these things. And we have to today because for so many decades, we've been the lead in technology that we've almost forgotten what it's like to be a follower. But in the future, we might be the follower on certain technologies. In some, we already are. China's ahead in some technologies.
Oh, yeah. Many. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about China's abilities. It's probably hard to estimate, but how far are they ahead of us? It used to be that people would say, especially when I was up on the Hill, when it comes to cyber or cyber attacks or infiltration of our systems, it would go something like the Russians are better at this, but the Chinese use mass. In other words, hundreds of more hackers, if you will, trying to get into our systems. Is that still the case, or have the Chinese caught up? And how are we doing as a government, as a country, in defending ourselves? Are we any better after 20 years of talking about cybersecurity?
It's hard to do a net assessment in that way between the U.S. and China, but I think that's a fair assessment that they just have mass. There have been reports publicly that they have 100,000 individual people doing science and technology, open source intelligence, working for the government. I mean, 100,000. This is just huge, huge numbers, and there's no way we could compete in that way. It's just not how our society and economic system are organized. It's not how our government works. We, I think it's fair to say, are still better at the more exquisite technologies that you would use for technology for intelligence, and we are better at the process of it. We probably have the most professional intelligence officers in the world. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But China thinks about intelligence very differently than us. They think about it as surveillance. They think, let's just collect everything and then we'll sort it out. Whereas we kind of think about intelligence as reconnaissance. Let me think of what I need to collect, then send something to collect it. Just a very different approach to intelligence. And their approach works really well in a world where there is a lot of data to be collected, and all of a sudden there's this AI that allows you to analyze all of that data. And we could learn something from that, except we need to do it in the way that still protects our rights and freedoms, which they don't have to worry about. They can collect all the data to include their own private citizens' data and collect it in one big fell swoop and do all the analysis. We're not going to do that. We don't want to have the CIA or NSA analyzing information about American citizens. So we have to learn from their surveillance approach, but do it in our way that protects us.
Makes sense. Okay, good. All right. So your book, we talked a lot about artificial intelligence and employing that across the U.S. intelligence community. We talked a little bit about economic espionage. What else should we be doing in the future to, succeed at espionage, if you will?
I think the number one thing that we need to do is to stop thinking about intelligence as something that is only done by intelligence agencies, because the threat today is not just against government people and military people, it's against everyone. The Salt Typhoon cybersecurity hack infected the phones of essentially...
So will you tell the audience exactly what Salt Typhoon was?
So Salt Typhoon was a Chinese cybersecurity hack that infected telecom networks in America and allowed the Chinese to obtain information from any phone or device really connected to those networks. And it's been reported publicly that it's estimated that this affected nearly every American citizen.
Wow.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Over 300 million people, all of us, were in a way targeted by this. And that's just, to me, is almost a Pearl Harbor level incident. It really shows what the Chinese goal is. And the Chinese goal is to surveil everyone in America in the way they surveil everyone in their own society. And in that kind of situation, there's no way that you can rely on just the intelligence agencies to protect you. It's like crime, or it's like cyber hacking. There's no way that the NSA and DHS could protect every American from a cyber hack. So we've all learned to protect ourselves in a way, to change our passwords, or even children are taught to do this, right? And to avoid phishing scams. Well, in a world where espionage is now targeted at everyone, I think we all need to learn to protect ourselves and learn counterintelligence skills in the same way we learn counter cyber skills.
More signal chats.
Potentially using encryption, but it's also things like triangulating information, because when we're now all subjected to information operations on TikTok, but really potentially on any platform, and you've got to be able to begin to recognize what's real and what's not, and learn to do it in the way intelligence officers do it, which is one way they do that is triangulating information. You never trust one source. You always look for multiple sources, and then you compare what they're saying, for example. And there's a series of those kinds of lessons that we could all learn. At the same time, we may even have civilians doing intelligence and going out and collecting and analyzing their own information without the government's involvement. There's an organization called Bellingcat, which is a citizen journalism site where they kind of do this already. Mm-hmm. Well, we can imagine one for the American people, where just normal people, everyday people are on it and collecting and analyzing information that is stemming from threats to other American people.
So crowdsourcing information.
Crowdsourcing information. And in particular, I would say that's most important for information operations, because I don't think we want the U.S. government involving itself too much in any activity that could end up censoring information. And information operations are targeted at information, and could the way to stop them sometimes is to stop the information, i.e. to censor it. Do we want the government doing that? Probably not. But would we be more comfortable if it was our fellow citizens doing it and trying to protect us? That does seem like a way that would be more comfortable. And I think about it like this. We have the police to fight crime, but we also have neighborhood watches.
Yeah.
And we could have a neighborhood watch for intelligence that operates alongside the police.
Fascinating. This is somewhat related to a thought I had. Others have said it, that when we talk about the American people, there's so much expertise that lies in Silicon Valley, wherever, or New York City, as they deal with the Chinese and others around the globe. I know that there are efforts to chit-chat with these types of people, but it seems to me we need to call upon people's patriotism and somehow systematize the private sector's views and observations into U.S. intelligence community analytical products. Is that crazy, or does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense, and it is sort of an extension of what I was just saying, in that for some areas, I would say in particular, the economic area and science and technology, the expertise is not in the intelligence community. It's outside of it. It's in commercial companies, it's in nonprofits, it's in academia. And those people don't necessarily want to work for an intelligence agency. They may not want to move to the Washington, D.C. area, and they may not want to work on a government salary, or they may just feel uncomfortable being part of the national security community in general for various reasons. But I would suggest they all still, first of all, are under threat, but second of all, probably still want America to be a safe place and still want us to not be threatened. And so how do we bring them in? And how do we do that? And one of the ways to do that is to have them work outside of a traditional intelligence agency in perhaps the way I was just suggesting, which is sort of a democratized, civilian intelligence agency. That could be one way to do it. Another way to do it is that the agencies could become more comfortable working with those companies, sharing information back and forth with them. And that's important, back and forth.
Yeah.
So not just being a one-way street where they say, we want your information, we're not going to give anything back, but going two ways and really starting to partner on these things that affect everyone.
Yeah.
Well, also, they do have a need to retain security, and they don't want to release sources and methods. That's understandable. I think most people would understand that. But balancing that off with, hey, if you're going to be a partner, we're going to work together on science and technology intelligence, because maybe we have common ground. Maybe we are both worried that China might use biotechnology to harm American citizens, and you're a biotechnologist and you are worried about that too, and so you want to work with the intelligence community. Well, you need to be a partner, and the intelligence community needs to treat you like one.
It's an absolute imperative. I remember once on the committee, we had CIA. We wanted to do a China series. CIA was expert at the Chinese military, political developments, what was going on in the Politburo. But we had someone from Goldman Sachs come in to tell us about the economic part of it all, and he blew us away. And I think the members learned a lesson there. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to hear from you what the agenda should be if you had a meeting or an audience with the right people at the White House or even at DNI or CIA. But I mean, first, just to summarize, And lots of people have talked about the rapid adoption of technology from the private sector. But that's one. Cooperation with the private sector, what we just mentioned, to gather their views on technology and economics, et cetera. And then us collecting economic data. Those are gigantic muscle movements, if you will. And it seems to me are going to require a gigantic cultural change. Do I have that right? Is this the essence of what you're arguing? And how hard will that be?
Yeah, if I had that meeting with the president or with the DNI or the director of the CIA, I would suggest that this is a revolution. This is not just a continuation of where we were. We need to see an intelligence community in 5 years that is as different in 5 years from today as the CIA was from, our intelligence function in 1930. Just a completely different world. And we need to do that because the threat is so real with China, and because the technology is changing so fast with AI. And the three things that I would suggest that need to get done is, one, remove the blockage of seeing intelligence as something that's just a political and military issue and begin to see it as part of the entire competitive process and landscape with China. So across the board. And think about that in terms of economic intelligence, science and technology intelligence, and other areas like that. Two, go all in on AI. I mean, I would stop seeing AI as a tool for analysts, for example, to use, and AI as the thing that does the intelligence. And analysts and collectors and others now have a partner in the AI.
I got you on stop seeing it just as an analytical tool, but it is the intelligence. What do you mean?
To have AI do the analysis.
Yeah.
Create fully finished intelligence that's collected from a sensor that is fed into another AI analytical system, turned into a finished analytical report and disseminated to a person, or maybe even disseminated to another AI.
So a drone picks up information, I'm just making this up, on an air base somewhere in the Middle East. That is routed back and matched with analytical product that has been previously done or could be done based on open source and Intel holdings through a large language model. Fuse those things together into an intelligence product that goes very quickly to policymakers.
Yeah, that a person never touches.
Wow.
And
well, won't we always want a human in there? I mean, well, realistically, won't there always need to be a human there just to make sure it didn't go off the rails?
You still would require quality control, just like you do with people. So there might be a senior intelligence officer who reviews an AI product like they would review a junior analyst product.
Yeah.
You might have other AI systems reviewing the people-derived products and AI-derived products, right? There would still need to be a process for QC.
Okay.
And there would still be, in most cases, at the most senior level, a person who is doing the briefing, who's sitting there with the president or with a general. So they would also be involved in that. But I think there is a reasoning behind having the AI do it, which is that people cannot keep up with the speed at which intelligence is going to be needed, especially on a battlefield. But even in the world, so much is happening so fast now. It's so complicated that people can't keep up with it. And so, yes, it's uncomfortable. And I'll tell you right now, some of those AI-derived reports are going to be bad. They're going to have errors.
Yeah.
They're going to make hallucinations, but you know what? Sometimes people's products are bad too, and they make errors, and they're just wrong sometimes. And we're going to have to kind of get comfortable with that. So that would be number two. And number three, I would think outside the agency. I would stop thinking about intelligence as something that just gets done by government agencies. I would think about a whole of society approach and think about how to truly bring in companies and nonprofits and so forth, but civil society as a whole. And to realize that the threat now is against all of us, and everyone needs to be protected, and they will need to protect themselves. And the intelligence community should help people to do that. They should help with the training and providing tools. But that also that civil society has a role to play and can collect and analyze intelligence to protect itself. And in some cases, that may be done better than an intelligence agency could do on its own, and that they should accept this and make it part of the system.
And this is where you would tuck in open source intelligence. It kind of goes throughout all of them, but in particular, we need large language models, constantly surveying everything in the world that's online and figuring out a way to put it into our own analytical reports.
Yeah, I would think about intelligence agencies. They're trying to sense what's happening in the world and make sense of what's happening in the world, and to use that to help people make decisions. And you need as much information as you can to do that. And open source information is particularly important in areas like economics and science and technology, for example, where that's where most of the information is. But that's not to dismiss the need for the classified information. And the problem with open source is that an adversary knows that it's open source. They can hide from it because they know that it's being viewed. They know when a commercial satellite is taking a picture of them, most likely. And so you also need classified systems where they don't know we're collecting it. They don't know how we're collecting it. They don't know what we're capable of doing. You still need those systems. You need both.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is amazing. It is easy enough to write about the past because you can go to documents and interview people. You've written a book about the future and what we ought to be doing as an intelligence enterprise. So congratulations. This is a terrific read. I think people are going to rely on it as we peer into the future and figure out how to organize ourselves, especially the geopolitical competition with China. So Anthony Vinci, author of The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, The Future of Espionage, and the Battle to Save America. Thank you so much for being on NatSec Matters.
Thanks for having me.
That was Anthony Vinci. I'm Michael Allen. If you enjoy listening to NatSec Matters, please leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please email our team at bgs@bgsdc.com. You can also find this email in the show notes. Please join us next week for another episode of NatSec Matters.
NatSec Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey with assistance from Ashley Berry. NatSec Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.